This is the image we're about to paint, but before we do that, I'm going to do a little bit of planning here. Normally I put down my base undercoat of lean paint, and it's darker in value. Now, I stated in the previous episode that I work from background to foreground, dark to light. So with that in mind, I want to put in my darker background colors. For instance, in the sky, we're going to somewhat drift away from that system in that I'm going to start out with a light color sky. This is a blue-gray mix, light and shade or value. And then as I work forward, we have this white cloud in here, and then increasingly darker values of clouds. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. If I was to do this background sky with my larger brushes, I would use this lighter blue-gray color. And as I come forward into the picture, I would put in the dark undertones of the background here. I might get into some of my darker greens. And as I move forward, we're starting to put in the darker values of the roofs, and then the darker values of the building structures, and the dark values of the road, constantly moving forward towards the viewer. Now, if we look at the sky, we have what we call atmospheric perspective. When we look at items further away, they appear to be a light blue or mauve color. And as we move towards the foreground or the viewer, the values increase and the details become more prominent. Now, I start out with a 1-inch flat brush or a 1/2-inch flat brush, and I put in all my darker background colors, and I move forward in the painting. Now let me discuss lean paint over fat paint. Lean paint is paint that is somewhat thinner. Fat paint is paint right from the tube. You need to have thin paint down first, and then gradually add thicker paint over the lean paint. You cannot have lean paint over fat paint because of the drying times typical of each one of those. Fat paint dries a lot slower than lean paint, so you would have a cracking issue if you had lean paint over fat paint. So when you're doing your background darker values, use lean paint. And as you come forward, you can get thicker with your paint. I generally stay with leaner paints and continue with those coming forward in my values and my details. Brush size is important. You use your larger flat brushes or your larger round brushes to put in your background colors. And as you move forward into the future on this painting, your brushes become smaller and you start adding more detail. So with that in mind, I guess we'll add some paint to this canvas. Hi everyone, we're back from break. What I'd like to do is cover some areas prior to getting back to our painting, and I wanted to cover composition of your piece of art. You'll often hear me refer to platform, which is the medium you're going to use to put your art on, whether it be a piece of paper, a canvas, a wood plank, or even a wall. That I considered to be a platform. Now I also brought up the rules of third, where you divided your platform into thirds as far as your length and your height. So I would lightly draw in my thirds. And right where the lines cross, those are my points of third or my points of interest. So if I had a particular object I wanted the viewer to focus on, I would put that particular object on one of those thirds. Now, one other thing I want. Please don't put your horizon on the center of your platform in either direction. Put your horizon above and below that center. Now I also brought up atmospheric perspective, in that in the background your values were a lighter shade of that value. For instance, mountains or wood lines in the background would be a very light shade of blue or mauve, and as we come forward, that blue would deepen in value. Let's also bring up perspective, in that we want to be concerned with size and detail and sharp edges. Now size in the background are very little as far as um, added things to an object. For instance, if we had a person in our background, it would seem like a carrot with a little ball on top, and there wouldn't be much detail to that object in the background. But as we came forward, you would see different objects on that person. Also, as we came forward, the size would become larger. And sharp edges. Now, I can remember when Bob Ross back in the past painted a picture, and he did a sky in a particular shade of blue, and then he would add his clouds, and then he would get a dry, clean brush, and he wisp over those clouds to get rid of his sharp edges. Now, that being in the background, you don't want sharp edges in clouds or in a tree. You don't want those sharp edges, and as you come forward into the foreground, then your edges become sharper. Now let's cover color. We have our primary colors. And then we have our secondary colors. And so when you mix red and yellow together, you get the secondary color of orange. And red and blue, you get the secondary color of purple. And yellow and blue, you get the secondary color of green. Now, complementary colors, which are really important in your blocking in stage of your work, whatever art it is, pencil, paintings, you want to be concerned about the complementary colors, because if you had in that picture we're going to do of that old mansion structure, you notice that background of those trees, and those trees are predominantly green, but in order to put in that background color, we have to have a very dark shade of that green. And in order to get a dark shade of that green, we would add the complementary color of red. So, in that picture we're going to paint, we would lay down that darker green because we added that complementary color of red to green. We lay that color down and we wait until that dries, and then we start adding greens that are lighter in shade because there's less red in them. Now, if we had a yellow flower and we wanted to add shading to that yellow flower, we would use smaller additions of purple to that yellow to get a darker shade of that yellow. Now the complementary color of orange is blue. Now another thing we may be concerned about is yellow, orange, or red are our warm colors, and green, blue, and purple are our cool colors. Now another thing we want to be concerned about is, let's take a pencil drawing, for example, or a charcoal drawing. Now when we talk about those two mediums, they are monochromatic in that they are just shades of one color, from white to black. In order to make your darker shades more prominent, you need lighter shades near that or adjacent to that. That makes those darker colors darker by adding your lighter shades of that, or lighter values of that color. Now this is the painting that I blocked in, and you can see all these darker values, this being that very dark green. And what I did was I took a lighter shade of green, which was the mixture of blue and yellow, and I added red to get the darker shade of green. Now I put in my darker shades of the background colors, say in the roof, which this is almost pure burnt umber, and you can see where I've developed some grays and greens and browns, which are the background colors, and as I come forward in my details, then I'll be adding lighter shades to these darker background colors. But we're quite a ways into this video as far as length of time, and I think this is a good place to end this session. In the next session, we'll be getting into more detail on this, and more brush sizes are going to get smaller and our colors lighter and our edges sharper. So until then, I hope you do well, and this virus seems to be almost over with, but stay safe. Good luck. Bye now.